Hi, thank you for joining me once again. Today, as I had promised, I have been joined by very good mentors and men and a man and a woman of God who I honor so much. And so today, as we had discussed, we are going to talk on who is a servant, and they'll be able to give us various definitions from their own understanding on who a servant is. I know it will be helpful, and God will continually bless you. And so I would like to welcome Prophetess Nekesa to the show.
Thank you, Wendy.
Karibu sana. We also have Pastor Mark. Welcome. It's an honor to have both of you. And I know someone out there will be blessed.
Amen.
And maybe I'll start with you, Mom. Maybe you can tell us what is your understanding of who a servant is, or who is a servant generally.
Pastor Wendy, thank you so much for that beautiful question. When we talk about a servant, we must first understand exactly what servanthood is.
Mm-hmm.
And when we are talking about servanthood, we are talking about a state, attitudes, a lifestyle of service.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you ask me to define who a servant is or to explain, from my understanding and definitions of many sources, servanthood, a servant is one who is in submission to another.
Mm-hmm.
So, in every aspect of life, in families, in marriages, there's an element of service because of submission and servanthood, because there's always a leader, whether it's in a family, at a place of work, a church. And a servant can also be explained as one who has given him or herself to meet with the needs of others.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot be self-centered and want to meet with your needs and say that you are a servant. A servant always aspires to meet with the needs of others.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's very interesting because when I did the introduction, when the term servant is mentioned, as you've said, it's being submitted to an authority or to someone else.
Yeah.
And so most of us, when we have workers at home, people tend to call them servants, because they're submitted to your authority. And so maybe we can listen to Pastor Mark and what he has to say about who is a servant.
Well, just as my wife has rightly said, that a servant has sometimes submits to the authority of another.
Mm-hmm.
That is in the context, in a formal context.
Yeah.
But there are informal contexts where people serve, not because the person or the people they are serving are authorities over them.
Mm-hmm.
A father can serve his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
He sees his daughter has a need, or his child, his son has a need. He can serve her. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the father has submitted to the authority of the child. Basically, bringing into context or to crystallize the point she has said, a servant is a person who prioritizes the needs of others. Mm-hmm. That is service. Yeah. So at the heart of servanthood is the desire to see that other people's priority needs are met. Mm-hmm. When you see someone has a need and you prioritize meeting that need, that is at the heart of servanthood. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You prioritize the needs of others. You get out of your way to help to meet those needs. And not because someone has asked you to, but out of your own free will, you notice other people's priority needs and you get out of your way to meet those needs. That is at the heart of servanthood.
Wow. Eh, actually, I was telling our viewer the other day that most of the times we find ourselves we've gone somewhere. People do not know us, but they will say he's a servant of God. You've never met, but I don't know whether it's through the appearance that they are able to detect that you're really a servant of God. I don't know, and it's very interesting. And of course, we find that there are times the word servant has been misused. You'll find someone saying mtumishi, and yet they do not understand what mtumishi really means. You need to, as Pastor Mark has said, you prioritize others.
It is true.
You prioritize others before yourself. It takes a lot of sacrifice, actually.
Yeah, and even truly that word has really been abused, and people have taken titles to confuse servanthood, because servanthood is beyond titles. People think that when they say I'm this, and we see it in some cycles, I'm reverend, I'm prophetess, I'm apostle. That is not the essence of servanthood, because listening to Jesus, he spoke in the book of Mark chapter 10 verse 45, and I quote, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many." And the Apostle Paul puts much emphasis in the book of Philippians 1:4, where he says each of you should be concerned not only about your own interests, but the interests of others. So, service, being a servant of God, entails, because Christ is our example, he's our role model. So, from the scriptures I've read, if Christ himself said the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, we should look after Christ as our role model. So, kukuwa mtumishi, as they say, mtumishi, and they make jokes about it. It's not just about self-exaltation, because the world that we are living in, people are now serving self-interest. It's a culture where everything, even Christianity, even the church, it's no longer about servanthood. People want to serve themselves. But servanthood is emptying yourself, giving yourself. A pastor, a prophet, a reverend, whoever you are, it should be service to humanity. It is not about titles. You should put others before you, and it should be willingly, the attitude. That's why I talked about the state of servanthood. It is an attitude, a lifestyle, because you gave a very good example. When people see those who serve others in the house, ndio wanawaita ni watumishi, wafanyakazi. Sometimes they call them because they think they're in submission, but even those watumishi, sometimes they are not even in submission. They are not servants. They are just doing because they need money for their own self-interest. But when you're serving a true servant, their attitude matters. They will not serve grudgingly. They will not serve complainingly. If it is in a church, when they do service, they will do it as unto God, not
unto men,
complaining and saying this and this and this, because even the leaders who are above us, whether they are pastors, bishops, that's delegated authority. They are also accountable to a greater leader, Jesus Christ. So servanthood, the attitude, the state, the lifestyle is very important, because you can be saying you are a servant, mtumishi, but you are not mtumishi.
You're not really practicing the art of being, or the state of being a servant.
Yeah, because unaweza kusema we ni mtumishi, you are a servant, hata tunakuona hapa, but you are not serving the interests of the ministry, the vision, the goals, the purpose, then you cease to be a servant because your motives are not right.
Yeah. Pastor Mark?
Well, when servanthood is very dynamic because sometimes it happens in very subtle ways, not in very obvious ways. Sometimes someone can be a servant, but you might not be able to notice that they are serving, because sometimes it happens in a context where the person has not been designated to serve, But then, just like going back to what I said, the definition of servanthood, prioritizing the needs of others. Someone can come, he is the boss, but when he sees that there is a subordinate or someone who is under him who needs some help, he comes in, he helps him or her to achieve the task, to meet the time deadlines and all that, helps them, though it was not his assignment. So sometimes it happens, it's like an exchange. Sometimes it happens in an obvious way. This is a person, say a house help or someone who is in the house. They have been assigned the duties of preparing meals to make sure that the house is in order, everything is in order, the children are taken care of. So it's obvious when you go there, that servanthood there, the person who is serving is obvious. But sometimes it happens in a way that is not that's not so obvious. That is because every leadership takes place in a context. Someone earlier on, I was talking to Reverend, and I was telling him, someone can come from a home. Now, if we are talking about the church, sometimes we look at the pastor and we say he is the servant. But every person in the ministry is supposed to be part of that vision. Each member of that community is supposed to serve because there is one thing that binds us, one thing that brings us together. There is a vision, there are common values that bind us together, and we all serve that. That is the rallying point for the community. If it's a community of believers, that is the rallying point for the community. There's a vision here. We want to live together as a community. We want to prosper together. There are common values here. This is what binds us together. So that is the rallying point. So if it's in the church, we have a vision of the ministry. If you're in a community, you are told, there's a way you go to a certain village and you're told this village is famous for this.
True.
It's because there is something about that village that gives it its identity.
Yes.
That is something that is common that the whole community identifies with. And when someone meets a person from that village, they say, hey, people from this village are like this, because there is something that has given them a common identity, and they all work towards serving it.
Yeah. Nice. Interesting. I think the topic servant or servanthood is quite wide.
Yes.
I find it quite wide, and we cannot finish it in a day, but I know as we proceed on, we'll be able to deal with probably all aspects of servanthood based on the context, just as Pastor Mark has said, based on the context and how to go through it and how to really understand what it all entails.